I woke up to the sound of rain tapping on a paper window and someone whispering, "Poor Ayan, Sound Cultivation." That was my first clue that my new life had already developed a reputation. My second clue was the robe. It was gray-blue, soft at the sleeves, patched near the hem, and folded over a body that was younger than mine had been by almost 15 years. My hands were slimmer. My wrists were lighter. My lungs felt like they had never shouted across a classroom full of 12-year-olds who had collectively decided that rhythm practice was a human rights violation. The last thing I remembered was locking the music room at the end of a long Tuesday, carrying a stack of beginner choir sheets, and thinking I really should stop drinking cafeteria coffee after sunset. Then came a flash of headlights. Then came nothing. Then came rain, paper windows, and the words "Sound Cultivation," spoken with the same gentle pity people used for broken umbrellas. I sat up too quickly, hit my forehead on the underside of a wooden bunk, and discovered three things at once. 1, my name here was Ayan Seru. 2, I was a first-year outer student at Cloudrest Academy, a cultivation school built along the misty slopes of Mount Leo. 3, I was apparently assigned to the most embarrassing discipline in the entire academy. Sound cultivation. Not blade chi, not storm palm, not spirit flame, not frost scripture, not even practical talisman repair, which at least sounded useful if one ignored the ink stains. Sound cultivation was considered entertainment, tea house work, festival accompaniment, something old uncles did with bamboo flutes near ponds while serious cultivators broke stones with their elbows. My new memories settled in like books falling off a shelf. Cloudrest Academy trained young cultivators to gather chi, refine their dantians, strengthen their meridians, and eventually choose a path. Everyone wanted a path that looked impressive during public demonstrations. The Academy ranking board loved bright aura, loud impact, cracked practice pillars, and dramatic sleeve movements. Ayan Seru, unfortunately, had weak pulse sensitivity, poor explosive output, and a spirit root that responded most clearly to vibration. In other words, my chi liked humming. The original Ayan had cried themselves to sleep the night before because placement results had been posted, and their roommates had reacted with awkward silence. Not cruel silence. Worse, polite silence. The kind where everyone suddenly became very interested in folding socks. I rubbed my forehead and listened. The rain struck the roof in uneven patterns. A cart rolled past outside with a wobbling wheel. Somewhere down the hall, a kettle hissed. Beneath all that, faint but steady, I felt my own breath tremble against the inside of my ribs. In my old life, I had taught children how to sing without hurting their throats, how to clap quarter notes, how to breathe from the belly, how to stop rushing just because the song got exciting. And now I was in a world where people literally pushed energy through their bodies by breathing. I looked at my hands again. Then I laughed once, quietly, because apparently the universe had taken my teaching certificate, dipped it in chi, and thrown me into a mountain academy. The student on the bunk below stirred. "Ayan," she mumbled, "are you crying again?" "No," I said, still listening to the rain. "I think I'm tuning." There was a long pause. "That sounds worse." "Fair enough." Morning at Cloudrest Academy smelled like wet pine, steamed buns, and mild academic disappointment. The dormitory courtyard was full of first-year students hurrying through mist with umbrellas, charm-warmed cloaks, and the anxious energy of people trying to look destined for greatness before breakfast. Little brass lanterns floated under the eaves, glowing softly even in the rain. Stone paths curved between mossy gardens and training yards. Somewhere, a bell rang 3 times, each note vibrating through the soles of my shoes. My body reacted before my mind did. At the 3rd bell, my dantian gave a faint answering pulse. Not strong, not grand, more like a sleepy cat opening one eye. Interesting. I followed the other new students to the hall of initial paths, a long wooden building with carved cloud beams and polished floors that squeaked under damp shoes. At the front stood 5 instructors. Behind them floated jade tablets listing the disciplines. Blade Meridian, Storm Palm, Frost Body, Spirit Flame, Mountain Root, Talisman Framework, Medicinal Chi, Sound Cultivation. Every time someone read the last one, their eyes slid away as if the words had caught a cold. Instructor Yao, a square-shouldered woman from the Blade Meridian path, called names in a voice sharp enough to trim hedges. Students stepped forward, received colored cords, and joined their assigned instructors. When Ayan Seru was called, several heads turned. Someone whispered, "That's the one with vibration roots." Another student whispered back, "At least festivals need music." A few laughed. Not loudly. This was still an academy. Cruelty here wore clean robes and pretended to be observation. I walked forward. The sound cultivation instructor stood at the far end of the line. He was a narrow man with tired eyes, a neatly tied gray sash, and a bamboo flute tucked through his belt. His robe had ink on one sleeve and tea on the other. Compared to the blade instructor, who looked like she could split a mountain by frowning, he looked like someone who knew exactly which cupboard held the spare cups. "Elder Ryuen," he said, handing me a pale green cord. "Sound Hall." His voice was soft, but I felt it in my sternum. That made me pause. He noticed. Most people, I suspected, heard his voice and thought, quiet. I heard placement, resonance, breath control, a tone supported from the diaphragm, steady enough to carry without strain. Back on Earth, I had begged entire choirs to discover that shouting was not singing. Here, Elder Ryuen had just spoken 3 words with more control than half the academy seemed to have over their chi. He watched me with mild curiosity. "You felt that?" "I think so," I said. "Good. Most students assigned to me spend the first week pretending they are not assigned to me. That seems inefficient. It is also traditional." Behind me, someone snorted. A tall boy in white-trimmed blue robes stood with the Storm Palm students. He had perfect posture, bright eyes, and the kind of hair that looked trained. A silver badge on his collar marked him as a sponsored student from a wealthy family. He smiled at me with polite sympathy. "Good luck, Seru. Perhaps you can play something encouraging while the rest of us cultivate." A few students laughed again. I gave him the calm expression I used to give boys who played drums with pencils during exams. "That depends," I said. "Can you keep time?" His smile thinned. Elder Ryuen made a suspicious coughing sound that might have been a laugh. Then he led me and 4 other disappointed students out of the hall, across a covered walkway, and toward a small building near the old garden wall. It had wind chimes under the eaves, cracked stone steps, and a sign so faded that the characters for Sound Hall looked like they were trying to retire. Inside, the room was warm. Not impressive, not grand, warm. There were cushions on the floor, shelves of old manuals, clay cups, a kettle steaming over a small spirit flame, and practice stones arranged in neat circles. Rain tapped against the shutters. A wall of instruments hung at the back. Flutes, bells, wooden clappers, stringed zithers, small drums, and hollow gourds. Elder Ryuen poured tea. "Sound cultivation," he said, "is the art of guiding chi through vibration, breath, rhythm, and resonance. It is useful for calming beasts, supporting group rituals, preserving oral manuals, easing meditation, and entertaining donors who enjoy pretending they understand art." One student visibly wilted. Another stared at the floor. I raised my hand. Elder Ryuen blinked. "Yes." "Does chi circulation have a natural rhythm?" He set down the teapot. The room went very quiet, except for the rain. "It should," he said carefully. "For most students it does not." That was the first moment I realized this weak path was not weak. It was just badly marketed. I met Mara Jin over lunch because she stole my pickled radish. That sounds dramatic. It was not. The cafeteria was crowded, the rain had made everyone damp and irritable, and the kitchen aunties were serving ginger rice porridge, scallion flatbread, and little dishes of pickled vegetables. I sat alone at the edge of a long table, still sorting through memories that were mine but not mine, when a hand reached across my tray. I looked up. A broad-shouldered girl with warm brown skin, short black hair, and a red cord at her waist froze, with a radish slice between her fingers. "Sorry," she said. "I thought this was Lemi's tray." A small student beside her, wrapped in robes slightly too large for them, whispered, "Mara, I am holding my tray." Mara looked at their hands, then at my tray, then at the radish. "Right," she said. "That was my second clue." I should have been annoyed. Instead, I laughed. She returned the radish with great ceremony, bowed over it, and said, "My apologies to both you and the vegetable." That was Mara Jin. She had been assigned to Spirit Flame, a respected path full of dramatic students who like to make sparks crawl over their knuckles in public. Mara, however, had a problem. Her flame chi surged whenever she got excited, embarrassed, hungry, competitive, or asked to sit still. In other words, constantly. Her sleeves had tiny burn marks. So did her eyebrows, though she was pretending otherwise. The quiet student beside her was Lemi Tor. They had been placed in talisman framework, not because they had powerful chi, but because they remembered details with frightening accuracy. They could look at a formation diagram once and redraw it from memory. Unfortunately, their hands shook whenever anyone watched them work, which made brush strokes difficult. Their talismans came out brilliant in private and nervous in public. Mara dropped onto the bench opposite me. "You're Ayan, right? Sound Hall." There was no pity in her voice, only curiosity. "I am," I said. "Apparently I'll be available for birthdays, festivals, and emotional support cultivation." Lemi's eyes widened. Mara laughed so hard her porridge rippled. "I like you," Mara declared. "Everyone else has been walking around like placement results are funeral notices." "For some students, they are." "Not for me," Mara said, then accidentally made steam rise from her spoon. "I just need to stop setting things on fire during breathing practice." Lemi quietly slid their cup away from her. I watched Mara inhale before eating, too high in the chest, shoulders lifting. Her breath caught at the top. At the same time, a faint red shimmer climbed her wrists. The flame chi responded to tension like a drumhead struck too hard. "Try breathing lower," I said without thinking. Mara paused with her spoon halfway to her mouth. I tapped 2 fingers lightly against the table, a slow beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. In for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. Don't lift your shoulders. She stared at me. "Is this a sound thing?" "It's a not burning your soup thing." That convinced her. Mara tried it, badly at first. She inhaled like she was preparing to fight the spoon. I shook my head and tapped the rhythm again. Lemi, after a moment, joined in with 1 careful finger. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 2. Out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The red shimmer around Mara's wrists faded. Her spoon stopped steaming. Mara looked at her hand. Then at me. Then at Lemi. "I have been told to master my flame for 6 months," she said slowly. "Nobody mentioned breathing like a sleepy cow." Sleepy cows are very stable creatures. Lemi made a tiny choking sound that might have been laughter. After lunch, Mara insisted we go to the library together because, in her words, "If Sound Hall has secret cow breathing, I need documentation." The Cloudrest Library became my favorite place by the end of that first week. It stood behind the main lecture halls, built around an ancient cedar tree whose branches disappeared through the roof and reappeared above the tiles. Warm lamps floated between shelves. Rain streaked the windows. Students whispered over manuals, maps, and cultivation charts. A tiny tea counter near the back sold refills for 1 copper coin if you brought your own cup. Lemi knew the old corners. They showed us a table near a window, where the floorboards creaked loudly enough to discourage arrogant students from sneaking up. There, between Mara's scorch marks and Lemi's perfectly organized notes, I began making my own notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "Chi moves with breath. Breath moves with rhythm. Rhythm can be trained." Then I underlined it twice. Not because it was profound, because it was obvious. And in cultivation, I was beginning to suspect obvious things were the easiest to ignore. Sound hall practice began with humming at dawn. That sentence alone explains why our discipline had a reputation problem. The Blade Meridian students struck wooden posts until the courtyard rang. The Storm Palm students sent ripples across rain barrels. Spirit Flame students balanced sparks above their palms. Mountain Root students stood in horse stance with stone weights on their shoulders. And we sat on cushions in a faded room, humming into clay cups. Again, Elder Ruin said. The other sound students groaned. I hummed. The clay cup vibrated against my fingers. At first, nothing happened. My chi fluttered uncertainly from my dantian, rose toward my chest, bumped into my breath, and scattered like a nervous choir entering on the wrong measure. Elder Ruin walked behind me. Too much throat, he said. Of course. I adjusted, relaxed jaw, lower breath, softer tone. The cup warmed slightly. Better. One of the other students, a boy named Pell, muttered, This is ridiculous. My cousin is learning spear chi. Then your cousin, Elder Ruin said, may one day stab things with great confidence. You may one day prevent him from coughing blood after doing it incorrectly. Pell stopped muttering. I loved Elder Ruin a little for that. Every day, I practiced the same 3 exercises. First, breath counting. In for 4, out for 6, no strain. Second, steady humming. Match the tone of a small bronze bell until the bell's vibration and my chest vibration aligned. Third, pulse listening. 2 fingers on my wrist, 1 palm over my dantian, counting the tiny surges of chi that followed each breath. It was boring. It was also working. On the 4th day, I managed to hold a tone long enough for the bronze bell to answer without being struck. It gave a faint, sympathetic ring, barely audible, but Elder Ruin looked up from his tea. On the 7th day, I could feel the difference between chi moving smoothly through a meridian and chi stuttering around tension. On the 10th day, I made myself dizzy trying to hum and circulate chi at the same time, fell sideways into a basket of practice gourds, and discovered that humility was also part of the curriculum. Mara found this hilarious. You fell into instruments. They were gourds. Musical gourds. Technically. Then you fell into instruments. Lemi wrote the incident down under a heading labeled Errors to Avoid, which felt unnecessary but probably fair. In the evenings, the 3 of us practiced in the Old West courtyard. It had cracked paving stones, moss in the corners, and a small plum tree leaning over the wall. Most students ignored it because the chi there was thin and uneven. I liked it because nobody yelled battle cries nearby. Mara worked on flame control. Lemi practiced brush strokes. I tapped rhythm on a flat stone. At first, Mara rolled her eyes when I made her breathe before summoning flame. I'm supposed to increase output, she said. You leak half your output through panic. I do not panic. A spark popped off her thumb and landed in her hair. Lemi calmly patted it out with a sleeve. Mara sighed. Fine, some panic. We started with a simple chant, not words with power, just syllables to shape the breath. I'm so raw. 4 beats in, 6 beats out. Mara hated it for exactly 3 minutes. Then her flame steadied into a small, clear bead above her palm, no larger than a plum pit and much brighter than before. She stared at it like it had personally apologized. Lemi's problem was different. Their chi did not surge. It hid. The moment they tried to draw a talisman under pressure, their breath became shallow, their wrist tightened, and the brush line broke. So I sat beside them and tapped a quiet pulse on the table. Don't draw the whole talisman, I said. Draw the breath. That makes no technical sense. Neither did my tax forms, and yet they controlled my life. Lemi blinked. Never mind. Start when you inhale. Curve as you exhale. Let the stroke finish with the breath. They tried. The first talisman still failed. The second smudged. The third produced a tiny stabilizing glow that held for 6 full seconds before fading. Lemi stared at it. Mara whispered, "Was that good?" Lemi's eyes shone. "That was the cleanest line I've made while observed." So we kept going. Rainy mornings, warm lunches, library evenings, lanternlit practice in the west courtyard, my notebook filled with observations. Mara's flame burns unevenly when breath catches. Lemi's line breaks when pulse outruns wrist. My own chi scatters when tone rises above comfort. No one became a genius overnight. No hidden master appeared. No ancient dragon declared me chosen. We just practiced. Slowly. Repeatedly. Like beginners. Which, in my experience, was how almost everything worth learning actually worked. The problem with Cloudrest Academy's first public cultivation test was not that it was difficult. It was that everyone treated it like a battlefield, a wedding, and a tax inspection happening at the same time. The test was held at the end of the first month. First-year students had to demonstrate stable chi circulation through a set of resonance stones arranged in a training courtyard. The stones did not require great power. In fact, too much power made them reject the attempt. Students had to breathe, gather chi, circulate it through 3 basic meridians, and release it gently into the stone until it glowed. Simple. Naturally, half the class was terrified. A failed attempt did not injure anyone badly, but chi backlash was unpleasant. Numb fingers, headaches, nausea, a bruised ego, and 3 days of drinking bitter stabilizing broth from the infirmary. The richer students feared humiliation. The poorer students feared losing ranking points. The anxious students feared breathing wrong, which is a spectacular way to guarantee breathing wrong. Elder Ruan explained this while we sat in Sound Hall drinking barley tea. Every year, he said, the test is designed to measure stability. Every year, students try to overpower it. Every year, the infirmary complains about soup expenses. Pell, who had stopped complaining about spear chi after discovering he could make bells ring with his voice, raised a hand. Why don't they teach rhythm before the test? Elder Ruan looked deeply tired. Because rhythm belongs to Sound Hall, and Sound Hall belongs to the donation entertainment schedule. That was the Academy's bias in one sentence. The practical problem appeared 2 days later. Lemi found me in the library with 3 manuals open and a cup of tea gone cold beside my notebook. Their face was pale. "Mara is going to fail," they said. I looked up. Did she set something on fire? No. That's progress. She overheard 2 Spirit Flame seniors saying output scores matter more than stability. Now she is trying to increase her flame density before the test. I closed my notebook. Mara was in the west courtyard, surrounded by tiny black marks on the paving stones. Her flame bead had grown larger, yes, but it flickered wildly. Sweat dampened her hairline. Every breath lifted her shoulders. A red spark leapt sideways and scorched the plum tree's lowest branch. The tree did not deserve that. "Mara," I said. She startled. The flame burst, harmless but dramatic, leaving smoke curling from her palm. "I'm fine." No one who says that near smoke is fine. She rubbed her hand. Kale said the resonance stones respond better to strong chi. He said stable weak chi is just weak chi with better manners. Kale Veyer, the polished Storm Palm student from placement day, sponsored robes, silver badge, excellent hair, predictable opinions. "He is wrong," Lemi said softly. Mara looked away. "He's ranked 3rd. "Ranked 3rd in what?" I asked. "Stable circulation or expensive sleeve embroidery?" That got half a smile. But Mara's fear remained. I understood it. On Earth, I had watched students panic before performances because someone told them louder meant better. They would push, strain, forget everything we practiced, and then look shocked when the song fell apart. Cultivators were the same, just with more glowing. The next day, the problem spread. Lemi showed us the preliminary practice records. They had copied them from the public board because Lemi copied everything. Out of 60 first years, 23 had unstable breath marks. 14 had early signs of circulation conflict. 9 had been advised to reduce output. Almost all of them were from flashy paths. The academy called it normal. I called it a rehearsal disaster. The resonance stones in the public test did not need more chi. They needed chi delivered at a steady rhythm. Students were failing not because they lacked talent, but because their breathing and circulation were fighting each other. Their bodies were trying to perform one tempo while their chi rushed ahead in another. Like a choir where the sopranos sprinted, the altos panicked, and the tenors blamed the sheet music. I explained this to Elder Ruin after class. He listened without interrupting, fingers around his teacup. When I finished, he asked, "And what do you propose?" "A practice chant." Pell made a face. "For the whole class, they'll laugh us out of the courtyard." "Probably," I said, "at first." Elder Ruin's mouth twitched. "A chant cannot force stable cultivation," he said. "No," I agreed, "but it can give the breath something to hold on to." Lemi nodded quickly. "And if the beat matches the resonance stone's acceptance pulse, students might stop overcorrecting." Mara leaned forward. "Can we test it?" That was how our small problem became a project. Not saving the world. Not defeating a demon emperor. Just trying to keep our classmates from embarrassing themselves and drinking medicinal soup. Honestly, it felt more useful. We began in the old archive, because all good ideas at Cloudrest Academy seem to start with dust. The archive sat below the library, down a narrow stair that smelled of cedar, ink, and forgotten deadlines. Lemi had permission to enter because they helped the assistant librarian repair catalog talismans. Mara had permission because she carried 3 lanterns without burning anything. I had permission because Elder Ruin wrote a note that said, "Ayan is unlikely to damage anything important on purpose." High praise. We searched for manuals on resonance stones, beginner chi tests, and sound-guided meditation. Most were dull. Some were contradictory. One scroll from 80 years ago described Sound Hall students supporting group cultivation exercises before the academy ranking system became obsessed with individual displays. That scroll mattered. According to the old method, a steady tone could help synchronize breathing across a group, not control them, not force their chi, just create a shared external pulse, the way marching feet fall together when drums begin. I knew that from Earth. Ensembles breathe together. Classrooms settle when clapping patterns become predictable. Nervous performers calm when the conductor gives them a clear preparatory beat. Chi, apparently, also liked a good conductor. We copied the scroll's rhythm pattern onto Lemi's practice paper. 4 beats gather. 2 beats settle. 6 beats release. 3 cycles before chi transfer. Mara frowned at it. "That is exactly your sleepy cow breathing." "It has a formal lineage now," I said. "Please show respect." Our first experiment went poorly. We placed a small resonance pebble on a table in an unused classroom, lit 2 lanterns, and had Mara try to feed flame chi into it while I hummed the pattern. She matched me for half a breath, got excited, surged ahead, and cracked the pebble. It made a tiny ping and split neatly in 2. Lemi stared in horror. Mara whispered, "Was that expensive?" I checked the academy supply list. 2 copper coins. Mara exhaled. "Good, I can afford my crimes." The second experiment went better. I stopped humming a continuous tone and used soft syllables instead. Hum-sa, hum-sa. Mara found it easier to follow. Her chi entered the pebble in pulses, still uneven but no longer attacking it like an insulted goose. The pebble glowed for 1 second. Then went dark. We cheered anyway. On the 3rd night, Lemi added a simple visual aid. They drew 4 tiny circles on scrap paper, then 2 dots, then 6 flowing lines. Not readable text, just marks to breathe with. They placed it beside the pebble. Mara followed the marks while I tapped the table. The pebble glowed for 9 seconds. Lemi covered their mouth. Mara looked at me. Again. So we did it again. And again. By the end of the week, Mara could hold stable flame chi in the pebble for 30 breaths. Lemi, using the same pulse method, drew a stabilizing talisman while Mara watched, then while I watched, then while 2 other students from Sound Hall watched. Their hand trembled each time, but the line no longer broke. They began to smile when they worked, a small private smile, as if confidence was a secret they were not ready to announce. My own milestone came quietly. I was practicing alone after rain, sitting under the west courtyard eaves while drops fell from the plum leaves in irregular rhythms. I had been trying to match my humming to the bronze bell's tone without pushing. For days, the bell answered only when I got lucky. That evening, I stopped trying to be louder. I listened first. My pulse, my breath, the rain. The faint chi hum in the stone beneath me. Then I hummed not over those sounds, but with them. The bronze bell rang. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a clear, soft note that hung in the damp air. At the same time, my chi completed a full, smooth circle through the basic meridian route for the first time. No scatter, no flutter, no nervous choir collapse. I sat very still, afraid to disturb it. Then Elder Ruan spoke from the doorway. You found resonance. I almost fell off the cushion. He handed me a cup of tea, as if he had not been lurking like a flute-carrying ghost. Sound is not power because it is loud, he said. It is power because it teaches things to meet. People keep treating it like decoration. People often decorate what they do not understand. I sipped the tea. It was bitter, warm, and perfect. The next morning, our project gained students. Not many at first. Pell brought a cousin from Mountain Route who got headaches during circulation. Mara dragged in 2 spirit flame classmates by threatening to cook their breakfast with unstable sparks. Lemi quietly invited 3 anxious talisman students who were too shy to ask for help. We met in the west courtyard after dinner. No banners, no official club. Just cushions, tea, rhythm marks, and me tapping a practice stone while students breathed like sleepy cows with formal lineage. The funny thing was, it worked. Not perfectly, not instantly, but enough. Shoulders lowered, hands steadied, chi stopped surging quite so wildly. And for the first time since arriving in this world, I looked at a group of students breathing together under lantern light and felt the old ache of teaching turn into something new. I missed my classroom. But maybe, just maybe, I had found another one. Cale Veyer noticed us on the 6th evening. Of course he did. Nothing attracts prestigious students faster than other people improving without permission. We were in the west courtyard after supper. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the stones dark and shining. Lanterns floated near the plum tree. Someone had brought sesame cakes from the cafeteria. Pell's cousin was breathing through a mountain root circulation pattern without clutching his forehead. Lemi was helping a talisman student adjust wrist tension. Mara had a flame bead hovering above her palm, steady as a candle in a sealed room. I sat on a cushion, tapping the slow pulse with 2 fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 2. Out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then the courtyard gate creaked. Cale stood there with 2 Storm Palm students behind him. His robes were immaculate. His expression was pleasant. That made me suspicious. So this is the little breathing club, he said. Mara's flame flickered. I kept tapping. Practice group, I said. For the public test. For breathing. The test is simply one of the many activities that benefits from not panicking. One of Cale's friends laughed. Cale looked at the students seated around the courtyard. Some lowered their eyes. A few shifted as if they had been caught doing something shameful instead of basic cultivation. That annoyed me more than Cale did. He walked closer, hands folded behind his back. I understand the appeal, he said. For students with weak control, perhaps a chant feels comforting, but you should be careful. Depending on sound cultivation may make them weaker in real conditions. There it was, the Academy's favorite mistake. assuming support was dependence. I stopped tapping. The sudden silence made Mara look up. "Do you believe rhythm creates weakness?" I asked. "I believe real cultivators should command their chi directly." "Do you command your heartbeat directly?" His smile paused. "That is not the same." "No," I said. "Your heartbeat is more advanced." Lemi made a tiny sound behind their sleeve. Kale's friends did not laugh this time. He looked at the resonance pebble on the table, then at Mara's steady flame. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Mara Jin," he said, "your flame output was higher last week." Mara's jaw tightened. "Yes," she said. "It also tried to leave through my eyebrows." "Power requires risk." "Soup requires salt," I said. "Too much still ruins dinner." That earned a real laugh from Pell, who immediately pretended to cough. Kale's gaze shifted back to me. "Seru, was it? I hope you do not convince these students that a tea house discipline can replace proper cultivation." I stood. Not dramatically. My knees cracked a little, which reduced the effect. "It does not replace proper cultivation," I said. "It helps students do proper cultivation without fighting their own lungs." "Cute. Accurate." His smile sharpened. "The public test is in 4 days. Perhaps we will see whether your humming survives pressure." Mara stepped forward. "Kale." I lifted a hand. Not because I needed protection, because Mara's flame had brightened and the plum tree had suffered enough. "We will," I said. Kale gave a small bow, polished and shallow, then left with his friends. The courtyard stayed quiet for several breaths. Then Pell whispered, "I hate that his hair didn't move in the wind." Everyone laughed, and the tension broke. But Kale had done damage. The next day, 3 students stopped coming. One told Lemi they did not want to be seen relying on sound hall. Another said their instructor advised them to focus on real methods. The third simply avoided our eyes in the cafeteria. It stung. More than I expected. I told myself it was fine. We were not official. I had no right to be disappointed. People could choose their own training. Still, that evening, when fewer cushions were filled, I tapped the rhythm a little too hard. Mara noticed. After practice, she sat beside me under the eaves and handed me a sesame cake wrapped in paper. "You're doing the teacher face," she said. "I have several teacher faces. The one where you pretend you're not hurt because students made a bad decision." I took the cake. "It's their choice." "Still hurts." "Yes." She leaned back against the wooden post. "For what it's worth, my flame hasn't been this steady since I started. Lemi's talismans are better. Pell's cousin can sleep without headaches. That is not nothing." I looked across the courtyard. Lemi was carefully gathering the rhythm papers before the night damp could curl them. Their movements were still nervous, but less apologetic than before. "I know," I said. Mara nudged my shoulder with hers. "Then stop measuring the song by the people who left before the second verse." That was annoyingly good advice. Did you just use a music metaphor at me? I have been infected. We sat there, eating sesame cake while lanterns swayed and the academy bells rang curfew. 4 days until the test. The pressure was gentle compared to wars and prophecies, but pressure does not need to be world-ending to matter. For some students, one public failure would confirm every doubt they had about themselves. For me, it was simpler. I wanted Sound Hall to be useful in public. Not flashy, not dominant, useful. Sometimes dignity begins there. The day before the test, the practice courtyard broke. That was not an exaggeration, though it was also not as impressive as it sounds. The academy had 3 public cultivation courtyards. The east courtyard was for advanced students. The central courtyard was for formal testing. The west courtyard, our mossy little refuge, was supposed to be too minor to matter. Unfortunately, 60 nervous first years had been using the central courtyard all week. Too much unstable chi had passed through the resonance stone formation. By afternoon, The assistant instructors discovered that the acceptance pulse of the stones had become irregular. The stones still worked, but not smoothly. One glowed too quickly. Another rejected chi after 3 breaths. A third hummed at a slightly different pitch from the others. For advanced cultivators, this was a minor inconvenience. For first years already afraid of backlash, it was a recipe for chaos. I learned this because Lemi overheard 2 instructors discussing it near the library stairs, copied every word from memory, and arrived at dinner looking like someone had swallowed a thundercloud. "They are still holding the test tomorrow," Lemi whispered. "They said postponing would disrupt the academy schedule." Mara stared at them. "People are going to fail because of scheduling." I stirred my soup. Some truths are universal across worlds. Administrators fear calendar changes more than small disasters. We found Elder Ryuen in Sound Hall, cleaning his flute with the air of a man who had expected nonsense and was still disappointed. "Yes," he said after Lemi explained. "The formation pulse is uneven." "Can it be repaired?" I asked. "By a formation master, yes, in 3 days. The test is tomorrow." "Then no." Mara crossed her arms. "Can Sound Hall stabilize it?" Elder Ryuen looked at her, then at me. "Not the formation itself." I heard the unspoken part. "But..." He set the flute down. "But sound can provide an external pulse stronger than the stones, irregularity. If students follow the sound instead of reacting to each stone individually, they may maintain circulation." Lemi's eyes sharpened, like a guide tone. "Yes." Mara grinned. "So we do the breathing chant." "In front of everyone," Pell said weakly from the doorway. Apparently he had followed us. "During the public test." Silence. Even Mara's grin dimmed. I pictured it clearly. The central courtyard full of students, instructors, ranking boards, visiting families, and older disciples looking for entertainment. Sound Hall students standing at the side, humming like human metronomes while prestigious paths tried not to laugh. It could work. It could also make Sound Hall the academy joke for the next decade. Elder Ryuen said nothing. He only poured tea into 4 cups and waited. I appreciated that. Good teachers know when a decision must belong to the student. Lemi spoke first. "If the stones are unstable, people could get backlash." "Minor backlash," Pell said. "Minor still hurts," Lemi replied. Mara looked at me. "You know the pattern better than anyone." I did. Not because I was special. Because I had spent years teaching rhythm to people who thought they had none. Because I knew how to keep a room breathing together when nerves tried to split everyone apart. Because I understood that a steady beat was not decoration. It was a handrail. I looked at Elder Ryuen. Would the academy allow it? He smiled faintly. "The test rules forbid outside chi assistance. They do not forbid audible timing." That sounded suspiciously like malicious compliance wearing house slippers. "Kale will object," Mara said. "Probably. Other students might laugh." "Almost certainly." Pell sighed. "I hate that this is noble." I opened my notebook. We planned until the lanterns burned low. Lemi drew a layout of the central courtyard from memory. They marked where the resonant stones stood, where students would line up, where instructors sat, and where sound would carry best without overwhelming concentration. Mara tested flame response under different chant speeds. Too fast made her chi chase the beat. Too slow made it sink. We settled on a pulse close to resting breath. Elder Ryuen showed us how to layer sound. 1 low hum to ground. 1 soft tapping rhythm. 1 breath chant only at the start of each cycle. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would feel like performance. Pell discovered he could hold the low hum longer than anyone else, because complaining had apparently strengthened his lungs. By midnight, we had a method. The pulse method, Mara called it. I objected because nomming things before testing them felt dangerous. She ignored me and wrote it on Lemi's scrap paper anyway. No readable characters would appear in public, but among us, the name stuck. Before we left, Elder Ryuen handed me a small wooden clapper. It was old, smooth from use, and repaired at one corner with pale glue. "This belonged to my teacher," he said. "He used it when Sound Hall still assisted foundation classes." I took it carefully. "What happened?" "People decided support looked less impressive than spectacle." He said it without bitterness, which somehow made it sadder. Outside, the academy slept under a cloudy sky. Dorm windows glowed faintly. Rainwater dripped from roof tiles. Somewhere, a late student hurried over the stones, slippers slapping. I walked back with Myra and Lemi. None of us said much. Tomorrow, we would stand in front of the academy and hum. It was not the heroic destiny most transmigrators probably imagined. But as I held the old clapper under my sleeve, I felt steadier than I had since waking in this world. After all, I had survived middle school choir concerts. A cultivation exam was intimidating, yes, but it had fewer recorders. The central courtyard looked much larger when filled with witnesses. Rows of students stood in their discipline colors beneath fluttering cloud banners. Instructors sat under a long awning with tea tables and record jade slips. Older disciples lined the walls, pretending they had come for serious observation and not first-year mistakes. A few visiting families occupied the raised benches near the back, their robes too fine for damp weather. At the center, 12 resonant stones stood in a circle, each waist-high and pale as moonlit bone. I could hear the problem before anyone announced it. The stones hummed faintly but not together. One pulsed sharp, one lagged, one trembled with a wobble like a badly tuned drum. Students closest to them shifted uneasily, reacting without knowing why. Elder Ryuen stood beside the testing officials, expression mild. Beside him, Instructor Yao of Blade Meridian looked as if she had bitten a lemon and found it underqualified. Cale Veyer stood near the front of the Storm Palm group. His silver badge shone. His hair remained offensively perfect. When he saw me carrying the wooden clapper, one eyebrow rose. Mara leaned close. "Ignore him." "I am trying. His hair is loud." She snorted. Lemi, pale but determined, clutched a stack of blank rhythm cards. They had no readable text, only dots and flowing marks. For students who wanted help, the cards would provide a visual breathing guide. For students who did not, they were just paper. The test began. The first student, a mountain root boy, stepped to the stones. He bowed, breathed, and circulated chi. His first 2 cycles were stable. Then the sharp pulsing stone tugged his attention. His breath hitched. The stone flared too bright and went dark. A testing official marked his jade slip. "Backlash minor, retry after rest." The boy walked away with numb fingers and a red face. The second student overcorrected and failed faster. The third succeeded, barely, sweating through their collar. Murmurs spread. By the 6th attempt, the first years understood something was wrong. Fear moved through the lines like cold wind. Shoulders lifted, breathing shortened. Chi grew restless. I looked at Elder Ryuen. He gave the smallest nod. Sound Hall stepped forward. Not just me. Pell and the other sound students came too. Mara stood near the spirit flame line, ready to demonstrate if challenged. Lemi moved quietly along the waiting students, offering rhythm cards with both hands. The courtyard noticed us. That is a polite way to say people started whispering. Cale's voice carried clearly. "Are we adding music now?" Several students laughed, though not all of them. Some looked too nervous to care. Instructor Yao frowned. "Elder Ryuen, outside assistance is not permitted." Elder Ryuen bowed. "We will not guide Chi, instructor. We will only provide a timing pulse. Students may ignore it." The chief examiner, an elderly woman from Mountain Root with kind eyes and terrifying posture, tapped her cane once. "Rules allow environmental sound unless infused with coercive chi. Proceed. Briefly." Briefly. That was enough. I walked to the edge of the stone circle where the sound would carry evenly. My heart beat hard, and for a moment I was back on Earth before a school concert. standing in front of rows of restless parents while 30 children forgot every lyric at once. Different world. Same nervous room. I lifted the wooden clapper. Tap. The sound was small. Tap. The courtyard quieted slightly. Tap. Pell began the low hum, steady and warm. 2 other sound students joined beneath him. Their tones braided together, not loud enough to dominate, only present enough to lean on. I breathed in for 4 beats. Out for 6. Then I spoke the soft syllables. Hum-sa, hum-sa. No power words, no ancient secret, just rhythm. Mara stepped forward before anyone else could hesitate. Spirit Flame student stared. She placed her palm near the first resonant stone, closed her eyes, and followed the pulse. In for 4. Settle for 2. Release for 6. Her flame chi moved like a candle flame protected from wind. It flowed into the stone, not in a surge, but in even waves. 1 stone glowed. Then the next. Then the 3rd. All 12 accepted her chi, their uneven hums slowly aligning around the external pulse. Myra opened her eyes. The circle shone pale gold. The courtyard went silent. Then the chief examiner marked her jade slip. Pass, stable circulation, no backlash. Myra turned, grinning like sunrise. That broke something open. Not applause, not yet, something better. Hope. Lemi gave a rhythm card to a shaking talisman student. The student followed the dots, breathed with the hum, and passed. Pell's cousin stepped forward, jaw tight. He matched the low tone, grounded his mountain root chi, and passed without headache. A Frost body student who had mocked Sound Hall 2 weeks ago accepted a card without looking at me and passed with tears in her eyes. Again and again, the pattern held. Not every student used it. Not every student passed. We were not miracle workers. But the courtyard changed. Instead of 60 isolated students fighting their own fear, there was a shared pulse. Breath slowed. Chi steadied. The stones, still imperfect, became manageable. Then Kale stepped forward. He did not take a card. Of course he did not. He bowed to the examiners, placed his hands near the stones, and gathered storm chi. It crackled blue-white along his sleeves, impressive and sharp. Too sharp. His first cycle surged ahead of the pulse. The nearest stone flared. Kale forced control, jaw tightening. The second stone lagged. He adjusted again, faster this time. I kept tapping. He tried to ignore it. His chi stumbled. For 1 uncomfortable second, everyone saw the truth. Kale was powerful, yes. Talented, yes. But his breath was chasing his pride, and the resonance stones did not care about his family badge. The sharp stone rejected him. Blue-white chi snapped back around his wrists. Not violently, but enough to make him stagger. Gasps rose. Myra took 1 step forward, then stopped. This was not danger. This was consequence. Kale stared at his hands, face pale. The chief examiner said, "Minor backlash, retry after rest." Kale looked toward the storm palm instructor, then toward the watching families, then, finally, toward me. I did not smile. I simply held the rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. After a long moment, Kale extended his hand toward Lemi. Lemi froze. Then they gave him a rhythm card. Kale looked at the marks as if they had personally offended him. Then he returned to the circle. This time, he breathed with the pulse. His storm chi still crackled, still bright, still stronger than mine by a ridiculous amount. But now it moved evenly. The stones accepted it. 1 by 1, they glowed. Pass, the chief examiner said. Stable circulation on retry. Kale stepped back, cheeks flushed. He gave Lemi the card with both hands. Then he bowed. Not deeply, but enough. After the test, nobody knew what to do with us. That was my favorite part. The academy was prepared for failure, ranking disputes, proud families, minor injuries, and students crying behind decorative pillars. It was not prepared for Sound Hall becoming relevant before lunch. The infirmary had brewed 6 large pots of stabilizing broth in expectation of the usual disaster. By sunset, 4 pots remained untouched. The healer in charge looked both pleased and professionally offended. The chief examiner requested Elder Ruen's notes. Elder Ruen handed her 1 page. She looked at it. This is a breathing count. Yes. And a tonal guide. Yes. And these dots. Student tours, visual rhythm marks. Lemi nearly dropped their tea. The chief examiner turned toward them. Well done. Lemi made a small bow, so fast their sleeve hit Mara's cup. Mara saved the cup. No fire, more progress. The official results were posted that evening on the courtyard board. The pass rate was the highest in 7 years. Backlash incidents were down by more than half. Spirit Flame had the strongest improvement over preliminary practice. Talisman Framework had the cleanest average chi release. Sound Hall, which technically did not compete in output rankings, received a notation for effective environmental timing support. Pell stared at the board. That sounds boring, he said. It sounds official, I said. That is better. Mara crossed her arms proudly. The pulse method should have been named. It is not an official method. It prevented soup. A noble achievement. Students came by in little groups, pretending not to look at us while absolutely looking at us. Some nodded. Some mumbled thanks. The Frost Body student who had cried after passing gave Lemi a packet of almond pastries and fled before conversation could happen. Lemi held the packet like a sacred relic. Kale arrived last. He came alone. No friends, no polished audience. His hair was still perfect, but his expression had lost some of its shine. Mara stiffened beside me. Kale stopped at a respectful distance. Seru, he said. I waited. He looked at Lemi. Tor, thank you for the card. Lemi blinked. You're welcome. He looked at Mara. Your flame control was excellent. Mara narrowed her eyes. I know. A fair response. Finally, he looked at me. I was wrong about sound cultivation. A simple sentence, clearly painful, probably good for his character. I nodded. Yes. Mara elbowed me. I added, thank you for saying so. Kale exhaled through his nose. I still believe cultivators should not become dependent on external rhythm. I agree. That surprised him. External rhythm is training, I said. The goal is to internalize it. A musician does not perform with a metronome forever, but they practice with one until the beat lives in their bones. Kale was quiet for a moment. That is reasonable. Careful, people may think you are joining the breathing club. His mouth twitched. Practice group, Lemi whispered. Practice group, he corrected. Then he did something none of us expected. He bowed again, properly this time. If there is another session, he said, I would like to observe. Mara leaned toward me and whispered, if he joins, I am nomming him Assistant Sleepy Cow. Kale heard her. To his credit, he only closed his eyes briefly. That night, Elder Ruen opened Sound Hall for tea. Not a formal celebration, nothing grand, just our little group sitting on cushions while rain returned to the roof and warm lanterns lit the old instruments on the wall. The untouched infirmary broth had somehow become soup for dinner, improved with ginger, mushrooms, and a heroic amount of salt by the cafeteria aunties. Pell claimed it was the taste of victory. I claimed victory should taste less medicinal. Lemi shared the almond pastries. Mara ate 3 and insisted flame cultivators needed fuel. Kale, shockingly, arrived with a tin of expensive cloudberry cakes and placed them on the table without making a speech. That was wise. Speeches would have gotten him mocked. Elder Ruen poured tea for everyone. The room felt different. The same cracked steps, the same faded sign, the the same old manuals and clay cups. But now students from Spirit Flame, Talisman Framework, Mountain Root, Frost Body, Storm Palm, and Sound Hall sat together, comparing breath counts and arguing about whether humming through the nose produced better chi stability than open vowel tones. It was the most beautiful nonsense I had ever heard. At one point, Lemi leaned close and whispered, "Do you think they will forget by next week?" "Some will," I said. "Some won't." "Is that enough?" I looked around. Mara was demonstrating how not to ignite soup. Pell was explaining low hum technique with the seriousness of a monk. Kale was listening to Elder Ryuen describe resonance without interrupting, which might have been the true miracle of the day. "Yes," I said, "that's enough to start." The academy changed in small ways after that. Small ways are my favorite kind, because they usually last longer than dramatic declarations. The next week, Instructor Yao requested a sound hall timing demonstration for Blade Meridian first years who kept straining their shoulders during basic cuts. She phrased the request as temporary breath support for posture correction, which fooled absolutely no one, but Elder Ryuen accepted with a straight face. The cafeteria aunties started saving us the corner table near the window on rainy days. The assistant librarian gave Lemi access to older formation records because any student who can draw useful dots deserves better archives. Lemi pretended to be calm and then spent 15 minutes silently arranging their brushes by emotional importance. Mara stopped burning sleeves. Mostly. Kale joined our practice group twice a week. He still looked uncomfortable when Pell called him Assistant Sleepy Cow, but he kept coming, so I considered that consent by attendance. As for me, I remained in Sound Hall. No sudden transfer to a prestigious path, no secret ranking crown, no ancient master descending from the clouds to apologize on behalf of society. Just mornings with bells, afternoons with manuals, evenings with friends, and steady progress. My chi grew smoother first, then stronger, not explosive, but dense in a way I could trust. I learned to send a hum through practice stones and feel where their inner structure changed. I learned to calm my own nerves before they tangled my meridians. I learned 3 old Sound Hall chants, 2 of which were genuinely useful, and one of which appeared to be about laundry. Elder Ryuen refused to explain the laundry chant. "Tradition," he said. "That is not an answer. It is the answer used when the real answer is embarrassing." Fair. 1 month after the public test, the Academy approved an optional foundation class called Rhythmic Chi Stability. They did not call it Sound Cultivation at first. Naturally. The notice said the class would cover breath packing, circulation timing, and group cultivation safety. Everyone knew what it was. On the first day, 27 students arrived. By the second week, there were 43. By the third week, the Academy had to move us from Sound Hall to the Old West Courtyard because the room became too crowded and Pell complained that people were breathing on his tea. We practiced under lanterns while autumn mist gathered along the walls. Lemi designed better rhythm cards, each suited to a different cultivation path. Mara helped flame students release chi without surging. Kale, to everyone's surprise, proved excellent at correcting posture once he stopped sounding like a ranking board in human form. And me. I taught. Not exactly as before. There were no whiteboards, no piano with 2 broken keys, no students asking if humming counted as participation. But there were nervous beginners. There were small breakthroughs. There were moments when someone's breath settled, chi smoothed, and their face changed with the quiet shock of realizing they were not broken. I knew that look. I had lived for that look. One evening after class, I stayed behind in the courtyard. The sky was violet. The plum tree's scorched branch had begun growing new leaves, tiny and stubborn. Lantern light warmed the wet stones. From the cafeteria, I could smell rice, ginger, and roasted squash. Mara and Lemi waited by the gate, arguing over whether almond pastries counted as dinner. Kale stood a little apart, pretending not to care about the answer while clearly caring deeply. Elder Ruin joined me beneath the eaves. "You did well," he said. "We did well." "Yes," he said, "that is better." We watched the last students leave, their voices bright in the mist. "I used to think I needed a flashier path," I admitted. "When I woke up here, part of me was disappointed. I thought transmigrators were supposed to get swords, systems, dragons, something with better marketing." Elder Ruin sipped his tea. "Dragons are expensive to feed." "That is probably true. And swords require sharpening. So does teaching." He smiled. I opened my notebook. The first page was still there, worn now at the corner. "Chi moves with breath. Breath moves with rhythm. Rhythm can be trained." Below it, I added a new line. "People grow better together." Mara called from the gate. "Ayan, if you keep writing, Lemi will organize dinner without you." Lemi said, "Dinner benefits from structure." Kale added, very quietly, "Almond pastries are not dinner." Mara gasped, "Betrayal." I closed the notebook and tucked it under my arm. The rain began again, soft on the roof tiles, steady as a practice beat. My chi answered it with a calm pulse, no longer startled by this world, no longer reaching backward quite so desperately for the one I had lost. I was still a transmigrator, still strange, still learning. But I was not alone. And Sound Hall was no longer only a place for tea house entertainers and forgotten manuals. It was a room full of breath, timing, patience, and students who had discovered that quiet power was still power. As we walked toward the cafeteria lights together, Mara humming badly on purpose, Lemi correcting the rhythm, and Kale pretending not to smile, I finally understood the lesson this world had been trying to teach me. Everyone hears the loudest technique first. But sometimes, the strongest foundation begins as the sound nobody thought mattered.